This is like taking candy from a baby, which is fine by me.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man.
What's good, y'all? It's the Penguins Bro here, and while I'm currently in college purgatory, a new game dropped that was so spicy I just had to cover it. So I'm guessing you all know Shadow, right? The ultimate life form, the second best Sonic character, the guy who desperately wants to go to Brazil. We all love him. The edgy anti-hero who fights for what he believes in, no matter how crushing the circumstances are. It's without question that these qualities propelled Shadow into stardom among the community. However, in recent years, he would face some harsh mischaracterization. I covered the writing issues of the 2010 era more in my Frontiers analysis, but basically, the media of that time had writing which just lacked passion, with Shadow being one of the many characters where that lack of passion showed. Thankfully, there's a recent game that turned this trend around. That game I'm covering here is the mainline Sonic game after Frontiers, that being Shadow Generations. This game marked a turnaround in the Sonic brand. Throughout most of the 2010s era, and even a bit after that, it was easy to tell that Sega was never fully confident in whatever Sonic product they were putting out. This lack of passion brought down many games, most notably Sonic Forces. While things were improving with Frontiers and the movies, this game is radiant with passion. Throughout every part of this game, whether you actually like them or not, Sega exudes full confidence in their design. The last game I felt that they were this passionate with was Sonic Unleashed, and I couldn't be happy that they expressed their vision without the fear of the general reception. Speaking of general reception though, this game is popping off with the reviews, showing that it pays to be passionate. Not only is this some of Shadow's best characterization, the other characters involved here are also really well done. The structure of this video won't be the same as my Frontiers video. I'm ditching the transition cards for one, so the video will be paced a little bit faster. I should say, I will go over spoilers in this video, but this game's been out for a decent while by this point, so that shouldn't be an issue. Without further ado, let's get moving! Of course, there's no better starting point than the main hog himself. To cut to the chase, Shadow's writing in this game does huge justice to his character. During the 2010 era, assuming Shadow even appeared, he would always be written in such a slanderized manner. He'd be broody, snide, and emo to the absolute max. The writers mistook his independence for him just not liking anybody and acting all, I'm gonna sit all by myself at lunch because no one understands me. That deprived us of a lot of positive interaction that Shadow could have had, like with Team Dark, that I feel has only just now gotten back on their feet. Thankfully, since the change in the writing staff during Frontiers, Shadow is way more in tune with his original character in this game. He's tough, no nonsense, ruthless, and conflicted. He's a deep character with a deep history, and I feel this game does a good job evolving that without making any Sega overcorrections. For context, I'm talking about things like Amy's over-reliance on tarot cards. I don't think she's a bad character, I just think Sega often gets the wrong message from criticism. Anyway, Shadow retains his signature edge, mainly when he's fighting, and I couldn't be happier. I'll never agree with the crowd that says Shadow's edginess is lame. Those fools don't know the difference between edgy and emo. Shadow's edginess is sick. It's been sick, and it's still sick. Personally, I think they should have went further. Give him his guns back. He's got the right to bear arms, alright. His arm's shooting bullets at your face! Regardless, they did Shadow great in this game. Even as a character arc, which I'll cover more in depth later. The plot of this game is about Shadow's past literally coming back to haunt him. And at the end, he's able to push past his trauma to save the world, because he's just chill like that. That's just a summary of the plot though. There's a lot more characters at play here than just Shadow. So let's get into the specifics, shall we? Shadow isn't the only one who has done well here. All these characters were written true to their character. Rouge, Omega, Black Doom, Mephiles, Big the Cat, and of course we can't ignore the elephant in the room being that Maria and Gerald Robotnik are back in this game. That is a huge deal, and obviously very important to Shadow, so I'm going to cover them last. For all the characters here, I'm going to analyze their dialogue and any relevant cutscenes, as well as their optional dialogue in the overworld. Let's start off with everyone's favorite Eggman hater, my glorious goat, E123 Omega. He appears really early on in the game, which leads to him having a surprising amount of character. At first he kind of just guides you on whatever's happening in the given moment, or he makes a funny remark about Shadow or a past event. However, the more you talk to him, the more he opens up. We learned from Rouge that it's possible that rather than being abandoned by Eggman, Omega was stationed by Eggman to protect Shadow from Neo Metal. That's pretty big considering his main character drive is how much he hates Eggman. Of course, he immediately writes it off after telling Shadow, and honestly I think he's right, since we know especially from the comics that Eggman is really quick to discard things. We also learn that he is not in fact powered by animals, unlike his predecessors. I figured as such since he's a reoccurring character, but it's good to know for sure now. However, the big thing for this guy is that we finally get to see hints of care and friendship in him. In one line he says he can't communicate with Rouge and tells Shadow to hurry since she's a valuable asset to us. And another line where Shadow is about to fight Doom and Omega says he believes in him? Believes in him? Bro, he cares about them! This calculated war robot cares about his friends! I never thought they'd dive into that, but I am so glad they did. Omega gets like no attention compared to the other two members of Team Dark. Seriously, the amount of times I've seen edits about Team Dark when it's just Shadow and Rouge had me pissed off. Admittedly, due to his nature as a robot, it's harder to explore stuff like this, which might be why we don't see him as much, but I'm glad the writers made it work here. Honestly, this on top of the Dark Beginnings animations show that Team Dark is back! And not on that no friendship, only business bullcrap that Sega tried to sell back then. I mean really back! As a bonded group who understands each other and fights alongside each other. And of course, speaking of Team Dark, we can't ignore its most connective member, Rouge the Bat. She doesn't have as much dialogue here because she's technically also helping Sonic in his part of the story, but what she does say here gives great insight into her connections. For starters, there's a cute moment I really liked where she noticed how both Shadow and Omega were worried about her and she gave them crap for it. It just shows that while Team Dark acts more professionally than the other teams, they still care about each other, which goes hand in hand with what I said about Omega's dialogue earlier. She also gossips to Shadow about what's going on with Sonic teaming up with that mute classic Sonic. Seriously, why doesn't he talk? But the real kicker is something else she says. By the point you found her, you've already encountered Maria and Gerald Robotnik, which likely reopens some old wounds for Shadow. And she tells him that, while it's good to cherish the time he's been given, he'll still have to move on. He isn't the same Shadow that they knew from their time, which is going to be a tough pill to swallow. Rouge understands what Shadow went through, and she understands that Shadow might be a little prone to making hasty decisions being face to face with the people he lost again, so she's making sure to look out for him. She even offers a shoulder for him right before the final boss fight. It shows how she's been through a lot with Shadow, and she supports him no matter what happens. I just really appreciate seeing these dynamics that Shadow has with Rouge and Omega being re-explored, as I think these relationships are among the most interesting the Sonic series has to offer. Of course, those two aren't the only people we encounter, so let's see what else is going on in this story. Now, there's one character I haven't gone over yet who holds great importance to this franchise. One who's beloved by all fans and had a prominent role in Sonic Heroes, the best game ever made. That's right, it's Big the Cat! What? Listen, I don't care what anyone says, Big is peak and you know it. Shadow definitely knows it, he smiled when he saw him. Anyway, true to his character, Big wound up here by complete accident. And while he's not really important to the story, he does provide some great flavor. For starters, he's freaked out by Omega since he thinks he kidnapped Froggy back in Adventure 1, even though that was actually Gamma, rest in peace. He's also apparently been to Soliana, the place from 06, and he's even met the princess. While that's funny to think about, lines like this are still good for the world. It helps remind us that the place and characters of 06 still exist, even if the events of that game were wiped. One part of Big's dialogue that I really liked is him casually mentioning that he's been on the Ark, which you can tell surprises Shadow. Him saying that canonizes the fact that in the Dreamcast version of Adventure 2, Big has tons of cameos throughout the levels, including the Ark. Although, the really interesting things come near the end. Turns out Big chatted with Gerald and Maria, and like... Okay, here, I just want you to read this real quick. He wants to take her fishing? Are you kidding me? That's so sad! He doesn't know that that'll never be able to happen! Seeing dialogue like that just hit me right in the feels, man. And speaking of sad, let's go over one of the saddest characters out there. The first boss of this game, the Bio Lizard. Since not everyone will know who this is, the Bio Lizard is Gerald Robotnik's first attempt at the ultimate life form. This was before he got the Black Arms DNA that led to Shadow, so as you can see, this thing ain't exactly in good shape. He's always hooked up to some kind of device or contraption, and he has all these gross mutations and lesions everywhere. Everything about him is just unstable. I think this line from Shadow says it best.
You tortured soul, I will end your suffering.
The line goes to show that the Bio Lizard's entire existence was forced upon it. And I mean it when I say lizard. You want to see what he used to look like? Look at this! Maria's holding a regular ass lizard. Look at how cute it is! And it got morphed into this abomination thanks to the experiments. Definitely a sad upbringing. And it goes to show the troubled developments of Gerald, who of course I'll get into later. The next boss in this game is the person that I teased earlier when talking about Big. And that is my beloved King Metal Sonic. Specifically Metal Overlord from Heroes. This fight probably had the least to do with Shadow specifically, but it was still sick as hell. Metal has the same defiance and determination that he had in Heroes, and is still clearly hung up about being the real Sonic. On that topic, I noticed he was taking that insecurity out on Shadow an awful lot, calling him fake hedgehog and imposter. Strange coming from him, isn't it? It was a pretty good reminder of Metal Sonic's big dilemma. Wanting so desperately to fulfill his goal, but can't due to his nature as a robot. A machine that can't reach his directive no matter how hard he tries. It's good to see that they remember stuff like that. I also kinda dig his voice this time around. It's different from his Hero's voice, of course, but I think it works pretty well for his big, monstrous form. Probably wouldn't work as well in his base form though, as the former voice worked better with its cold and calculated tone. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. Metal Sonic was awesome, I love Heroes Rep, this was an awesome fight. Speaking of fights, this next interaction, well, not really a boss fight, did offer some neat perspective. I'm talking about the fight against Sonic! I can see why this was just a cutscene, considering that Sonic Generations already had a Shadow fight. But regardless, there's one part in particular that I want to focus on. This part, where Shadow has a clear shot to blast Sonic, but then he stops himself. It shows that while they did have a disagreement, Shadow didn't want to actually hurt Sonic, and it's putting effort to control his newfound power. Of course, Sonic on the other hand had no problem clocking Shadow and leaving with what he thought was the Emerald. Dick. It's interesting to think about though, since for once we aren't following Sonic's perspective, it gives us a chance to see how other people perceive him. And after this cutscene, it's likely that Shadow perceives him as pretty freaking annoying. Alright, with all that said, I think it's finally time that I get to... Wait, what's this? Is this? No. They didn't. They couldn't! They did! Mephiles the Goat is back! Him being here means so much! It shows that Sega isn't afraid to acknowledge 06 anymore. And it also shows that he survived the ending of that game in his own purgatory. Unlike the other bosses, it's clear that thanks to his gate being tucked away, Mephiles does not belong here. He makes his goal very clear in this fight. He must restore himself to the timeline, and he uses any means necessary to reach that goal. He tries to murk Shadow the same way he did to Sonic. He tries to taunt and manipulate Shadow, failing in both regards. And when all else fails, he desperately pleads to exist again, using everything he has, only for Shadow to mog him and shove his ass right back into the scepter.
There is no future for you. Ever.
Oh!
Shadow's on that Black Air Force timing here. Mephiles tried the same tricks he did in 06, but Shadow doesn't remember who he is, and has none of the context that let his strategy work the first time around. The moment Mephiles realized that is when he started to crack. He's so reliant on being able to control Shadow, evidenced in his design, that when he can't, things just completely fall apart. For him, this was his desperate push to become real and enact his revenge. But for Shadow, he was just another bump in the road. It really makes you pity the bastard. You not necessarily feel bad for him because he's so evil, but definitely pity him. Just an awesome fight all around. The only thing I didn't like was his new voice. It's too high-pitched. Mephiles thrives on sounding like the most evil, diabolical character you can possibly think of, and I think this new voice just doesn't do that justice. Anyway, with all the bosses covered barring one, I think it's time we move on to who you all are waiting for. First of all, I just want to preface this by saying that I never would have guessed that we'd actually see these characters again in a Sonic game. Those of course being Gerald and Maria Robotnik. I do kind of wish we got to see more of them. They mainly were in a few cutscenes along with some dialogue like the others, but what we got was so rich, it made how little time we spent with them worth it. Starting with Gerald, he's he's got a lot on his plate, to say the least. His dialogue for the most part is mainly just him explaining various parts of the game, like the whole time travel phenomenon going on. But he does make damn sure to tell Shadow not to warn him about any of the events that'll happen to him, as that would change the timeline. One fun thing he mentioned was his studies on chaos control, and he even theorized about the dual chaos control moment in 06, which I thought was pretty cool. His dialogue may not be the best, but his journal is where the money's at. There is so much shit in here. For starters, we see what his two sons look like, one liking archaeology and one liking robotics. This means that we not only got to see Maria's dad, but Eggman's dad too. I never thought that was going to happen. We learned that he's been on Angel Island, which adds to the theory that Gerald used this mural from Adventure 1 to design the Bio Lizard, and this mural from Sonic 3 and Knuckles to design Shadow. We get to see more about Emerald, a character from Sonic Battle that Gerald ran some tests with, and it turns out that his archaeologist son is the one who uncovered Emerald, so hey, that's pretty cool. We see some more stuff like how he designed the Chaos Drives, those time switch things from Adventure 2 on that last level, and how he eventually made a deal with Black Doom. But soon things would hit the fan. With both Gunn and Maria's family breathing down his neck, the journal would slowly deteriorate as things kept piling on. He'd give Emerald a gun to buy some time for developing a cure, since they wanted weapons. But of course, if you watch the short, we know that Emerald would go berserk. Emerald truly has a lot going on with his character, but I haven't actually played Sonic Battle, I've only ever seen the story, so I'd have to go into that another day. But it is worth looking into if you're interested. Anyway, Gerald's writing eventually becomes damn near illegible, which illustrates his descent into madness. Thankfully in this game, he's still at the point where he's stable, but you can tell that he's very regretful, haunted by the sins of his experiments, yet with a lot of love to give. He views Shadow as his finest creation, but in one part, we see that he also views him as his son. That gives us a better look into their relationship, valuing him as much as he does Maria. Which makes it even sadder when you remember how Gerald went out in Adventure 2. On a lighter note, this also means that Shadow is technically Eggman's uncle, so have fun with that info. Moving on to Maria, it felt bittersweet seeing her in this game. There was a lot to unpack from her in-game dialogue. We know that she likes the staff back on the Ark, and that she also worries about the other kid on the Ark, Abe. You know, the kid with homophobia in his eyes. Of course, we know he grows up to become the gun commander, and he's probably like high 50s, low 60s by the events of this game. Just goes to show how old Maria would have been if she survived. When she talked about how school was up there, we found out that apparently Shadow never turned in his homework, which, yeah, that tracks. On a worse note, she talks a bit about her condition. At her best, she feels basically normal, but at her worst, she's unable to move or even see. It's easy to forget about her illness, but they make damn sure you know. Even worse, we learned that in the last few pages of the journal, Maria's parents had another daughter while she was on the Ark because they lost hope in her coming back. That is absolutely insane work. Not only did that add on to Gerald's downward spiral, it showed how fast her family gave up on her. Since Maria is very strong for being in the situation she was in. The best part of her dialogue though as all the heartwarming stuff she says about Shadow. There's a lot here, but the gist of it revolves around how much she cares for him and how proud she is of him. She's proud of him for fighting for what he believes in, no matter how many people stand against him. She admires how strong he is for resisting Black Doom's control, and she thanks him for being so patient with her condition and supporting her throughout all of it. It may not happen ever again, but it was great to see these two interact one last time. Now, last but not least, let's cover the big bad of this game. The devil, Black Doom. I know I mentioned Mephiles manipulating Shadow earlier, but this guy does that and then some. It was prevalent in Shadow 05, and it is very much the same here. As far as I've seen, there isn't really much to his character aside from filling the whole bad guy who wants to destroy humanity role, but it's his dynamic with Shadow that keeps him from being a basic villain. He knows exactly how to take advantage of Shadow's upbringing, meticulously crafting hallucinations that urge him down the wrong path. He sets plans to either get Shadow to join his side, or take control of him and use his power, getting his goal either way. I think this approach works really well with Shadow, considering what he's been through. After all, he had the trauma of losing someone close to him. There's a line that Maria said that I left out up until now. 3 fateful words that capture the severity of her demise. I love you. Imagine if you had no place in the world, with people viewing you with disdain and fear thanks to your upbringing. And now imagine you meet someone who, despite all of that, shows you nothing but support and sees you for who you really are, even taking you into their family. And when you two are at your closest, imagine it all being ripped away like that by an uncaring, power-hungry government. You should never have to lose a friend like that. You shouldn't have to lose them ever, let alone process that loss and carry on. Black Doom knew Shadow had that trauma, and even if Shadow forgave humanity, the anguish of knowing what could have been was still there. He preyed on that vulnerability, doing whatever he could to make Shadow crack. But he failed to consider one thing. The very same person that Shadow lost, while only temporarily, is back to support him in his darkest moment, reminding him that he's in charge of his own destiny, that he has people who love and support him, and best of all, giving him the closure that he needed his entire life. With all that, he used Doom's powers against him and took him down. At the end of it all, Gerald and Maria would soon return to their own points in time. While Shadow is panicked at losing them again, she reminds him that they'll always be with him, in his heart. Given the circumstance, while he's saddened that he can't change their fate, he accepts that he got to say goodbye and can finally start healing. Absolute cinema! That is how you write a game! Thank you for watching this video through to the end. I'm sorry that it took me so long, but I had to get my thoughts out on this game. All the characters were done wonderfully, and seeing interactions like this made 2024 for me. Let me know what you want to see next in the comments, and be sure to like and subscribe. I can't make any promises about when I'll upload next, but I'll always read what you guys have to say, and I'm thankful for your support no matter what. It's been real, everyone. Here's to an awesome 2025. So, can we get Year of Knuckles next, please?